Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It's Andrew Turner, host of the Praxi Pod. And today we have Mr. Ako Sabir. How are you, Ako?
I am very well, Andrew. Thank you.
And this is a kind of a Back to the Future episode, actually, because we used to be on Zoom, and then we went to Riverside, and now in honor of Ako, we should get the DeLorean out and go back to go to Zoom. But it's actually quite good. It's quite good on Zoom now. I think we've put some quite good features into it. So we're here, and thank you for joining the show. Obviously, on the Praxi Pod, we talk about things that are quite topical, I suppose. Things about data, things about AI, whatever that is. As people say, old MacDonald had a farm, AI, AIO, as I say.
That's the one. That's the one. We can talk about that.
And obviously, this latest thing, which is generative AI, which has kind of hit the scene in the last few years. But yeah, I mean, I suppose as an intro, could you maybe just give us a bit of a pen portrait, Ako? What's been keeping you busy over the last few years? And then we can get into the meat and two veg of your point of view and your insights, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Andrew. Clearly, I've been around. I've been in the game for quite a while now. But if I really summarize my entire career in two words, they would have to be really change and transformation. And I've spent the whole of my working life focused on shaping and delivering business transformation that really could have only been delivered through data and technology, and obviously more recently AI solutions. So I've worked in many sectors, including financial services, and spent a good amount of that time in insurance. But I've done a lot of work in other sectors, including media, market research, high tech, basically enterprise software businesses, telco, large-scale manufacturing, and even charity and non-for-profit. And the last several years, I've really enjoyed being in multiple interim leadership capabilities and solutions. So always focus on doing the doing, not just advising and producing the plans, and been incorporating AI into scalable business solutions and delivering tangible value for the last 10 years now, and have witnessed as a result of that the amazing and rapid advances in this area that has recently burst into the public sphere and has captured the popular imagination, which is great. But I've had a proper geeky start to my career, having started as a programmer, progressed through the various architecture routes, software, solution, enterprise architecture, you name it, and then moved into, as a natural progression, moved into more CTO and the occasional CIO roles, and then added the CDO role to the list in the last 5 years or so. That's a broad overview. What was the second question? Remind me.
No. I mean, I suppose that was a bit of a portrait about where you've been. I suppose the question with you, the questions that spring out of that initial intro was, what's been your favorite sector? Have you had a favorite sector that you've worked in? Because obviously you've worked across so many different areas. Has there been a particular industry that's kind of like, light the fire under you and kind of got you really excited as well?
I think the honest answer is not really. I think all sectors have their own challenges and the very interesting aspects that as an outsider, you wouldn't really even imagine. And then when you get to talk to the people and work with them, you realize immediately two things. One is there are some very, very interesting aspects of the industry that really presents itself to applying what you have done and what you've learned from other areas. So for me, it's that the combination of the two is getting to know an industry I don't know, and then being able to take what I have done and what has worked very well in other area and applying it. And it's quite nice when you get people to see actually there are different ways of doing it. And although every industry and every company is unique in their own ways, but actually many, many businesses of a certain size and so on, they are really grappling with fundamentally a lot of the same basic problems. So you don't need just because you are in a different sector and you are in a different company, you don't need to come up with a unique solution. A large proportion of the kind of issues that you face are those that have been faced by others and have been solved. So you can actually fast track a lot of that. But I do like financial services a lot, and especially insurance. I think insurance is one of those probably areas where significant opportunities still exist, because for good reasons, because of the nature of the business and the regulatory requirements. You typically don't see insurance being at the forefront of new technology and adoption and try being at the cutting edge of innovation. Of course, that's not true across the board. There are some very, very innovative insurance companies out there. But generally, when you look across the board for some really good and valid reasons, there is more potential as a result in insurance.
Yeah, I suppose there's kind of like disruptors, isn't there? There's like lemonade and was it peppercorn? As if I don't know, maybe you have to have like a funky name, like a colour or a food or a drink or something to have, you know, a new insurance brand. But there's quite a few. When I was in the US last year, there was quite a few. Some of the events I was at, which was trying to rethink the whole, I suppose, customer experience and use technology to do that and be a bit and stand out a bit and be what do you call it, more real time, you could say, or more I think more customer experience focused and more niche down on the offer they were making. It's a huge industry. I mean, it's incredibly huge. I mean, as I mentioned to somebody yesterday, I started in that industry, you know, 30 years ago, and you know, the some of the stuff that, you know, I was working on broking systems and, you know, Lloyd's of London stuff, you know, all the syndicates, and working with Swinton Insurance in the UK, like all the brokers, and then also working with the carriers as well. And a lot of that, you know, that basic value chain, or that we could say basics of that value chain is still in place. And some of the stuff has not changed because it's obviously, to your point, you know, there's a lot of regulation around it. But yeah, it's a thriving industry, thriving industry, lots of interesting people in it, lots of characters.
Absolutely. And it's fascinating because insurance is, obviously there are so many different types of insurance organizations and insurance products and insurance needs and the kind of customers and why you buy insurance. But if you look at it, we are having touch points as consumers, as people who work in businesses, and then as large organizations with insurance throughout our working and personal life and throughout various stages of life. And if you really look into what happens in insurance industry, it's fundamentally a data business, because you can't really understand the risk if you don't have the data and if you don't generate the insight on top of that risk. If you then don't understand that risk, if you don't have that data, you can't really price it appropriately. Then you can't, without data and without insight, you can't really assess your claims and detect fraud and all sorts of processes that you will see across the insurance life cycle is all driven by data and insight. So I think as a result, it's a very, very interesting and exciting sector to be in at the moment.
Yeah, and it's also very complex, because obviously on the accounting side as well, it's complex because you've obviously got the balance sheet provisions and things like that you've got to do. Yeah, I mean I was with a group CFO last week, and he's running 38 countries for a, you know, very large carrier. You know, he's in a multi-year transformation program because he's leading it, and it's a very big brand, and they're doing lots of very proactive work. It's just that, you know, it's not just about the tech; it's about the people, getting the people aligned, and actually placing those bets. You know, it's not like a gambling casino, but you've got to make strategic bets on where you place your investment and where you actually, you know, make decisions around the business. And it's pretty intense.
That's an interesting, actually, very interesting example, because from my own personal experience, if you look at finance in insurance, especially large complex insurers, where they, like the example where the operations span across multiple geographies, multiple jurisdictions, where there comes a degree of complexity, it's very, very easy to really overlook the kind of potential that exists within even the corporate finance processes, which are very mature. They have been there for years, well understood, usually well staffed. But then when you look at it, what you can do with the new data and the new AI capabilities is fascinating from so many different perspectives. Your recoveries, your tax calculations, what did you pay in taxes? You can do a lot. You're probably not in mature organizations. What you're not going to find is big major gaps in there, because everyone is now gone through their major regulatory updates and they are generally in good shape. But if you look at, as somebody put it to me, if you look at what you might be missing out, a lot of £10 notes in many different parts of your organization multiple times a day, then that very, very quickly add up. Now, historically, that might have not been economically viable to then add more headcount to really find them and rectify them. But now you can do that, well, practically for cost. So suddenly, you're looking at a lot of opportunities that have always been there, but they were not economical to go after. But now everything is changed.
In what you say, I mean, what would be an example of that? You know, what would, if you what you're saying is you kind of, that's what it took me back to my Tesco days and my GE days, where we used to look at lean and look at waste and look at process optimization and where is the leakages, yeah, in a process, an overall process, and look at how do you make it more efficient. Is that what has been you've seen as a big focus now for insurers around, I won't say, sweating the asset, using these new technology investments to really, get it more optimized than it was before, because it potentially was quite traditional as an approach, something, look at it through new eyes. Is that what's happening, do you think?
So there's definitely that scale, but even some very, very simple examples. So one that kind of just sprang to my mind when you were talking is recoveries. So if you are working and selling through brokers, and brokers are all different sizes. So you have the massive brokers with mature processes, and they have the right people to do what you ask them to do, reluctantly sometimes they don't do it. Or you have then at the other end, you have very, very small one-man band kind of operation and everything in between. It's not always clear to correlate what they have actually sold to what they pay you. So they might have sold multiple policies and then they give you one payment and you don't know how to match the two up.
So you mean like the reconciliation, the revenue reconciliation? Yeah, RevRec. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So there are many smaller opportunities to go after there, but because you have the data, you have the history, and you might not 100% solve it, but what will know then is where to focus, who to follow up with, and historically detect patterns at even the micro level, at the individual broker level. So then you are better prepared to follow up, to deal with it, to recover, to allocate, reconcile, all of those processes, but at a level that traditionally you haven't been able to go down into.
So have you found that there's certain parts of the value chain have kind of like, embraced these new initiatives more than others? Or is some people still battening down the door and saying, no, they're a technology Luddite? Any thoughts on that? Because obviously there's a lot of different stakeholders down the whole process, isn't there? If you've got someone like at one end, like Marsh or something like that, like a big insurance brokerage, and you've got the carriers and you've got the MGAs, and there's a lot of handoffs, you could say, in the process.
Yeah. If I look at the carriers, which is where I have spent quite a bit of time recently, I think there are two main areas where you see both adoption for AI and also a degree of resistance, all for good reasons, actually, but you have to overcome them. I think there is huge potential in the underwriting, because you can, especially if you are dealing with very large, complex risks, traditionally, you get a request for a proposal or for a contract in quite a lengthy document. A lot of it is unstructured. Now, if it's a risk that you've underwritten before and you see it again and again, you typically learn how that customer presents itself. So there's a bit of structure that emerges over time. But largely, you are dealing with a lot of unstructured data. You are dealing with a lot of complex, nuanced information that you have to make sense of, and then you have to compare it to how that changed from the previous year, the external factors that influence how you should, whether regulatory, whether market, how you should look at that risk. Those tend to be the things that are very labor intensive, and quite frankly, nobody really loves doing that, because you are having a lot of very valuable people with expensive people with a lot of valuable experiences spending time on something that is more or less really mechanical. So automating that is an area where I think what I have seen a lot of insurers make real progress by just completely shortening that time frame from, in some cases, from days and weeks to literally minutes. Now, what you cannot do, I think, for good reasons, and because there is a cultural resistance against it, is straight through underwriting. And quite rightly so, because you really have to present what the final decision is with all the justifications for why that is the right outcome to somebody with the right experience, the underwriter or the underwriting team, to then be able to, one, probe into them and make sure that it's all valid. Two, come up with justify the recommendation, and finally accept or modify, because there are AI models are very advanced. There's no question about that. But depending on which model you're using, whether you're using one of those big, massive models commercially available that have a lot of information and always trained to give you an answer whether they have the information for it or not, whether you're using that or whether you're using
trying to make you happy is
I like the way they always start everything and say, "You are absolutely right." Well, no, I'm not, because I will deliberately tell you something that's not. Anyway, we digress. So I think that's an area where I've seen a lot of traction and there's a lot of emphasis on. Then there is the claim side as well, because you have the same problem. And the problem we have with claims is not just understanding the claim and making sure that it's within the policy coverage, so there is no fraud and all of that. You've got to then tie it back into what does that mean from a reserving point of view? Because in insurance, I think one of those things that is one of the facts that's very obvious, but I think probably not always remembered, is claims is as important as the underwriting. Underwriting is a key part because that's where the money comes in, but claims is where the money goes out. So that there are huge opportunities within claims, and there is also some resistance in that area as well, but there is good traction. But then when it comes then to triaging between the claims, your underwriting, and your reserving actuarial, there is significant opportunity that I think is not sufficiently either understood or tapped into as a result.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Yeah, I mean that's where our observation is as well. In the conversation we've had over the last period of time, and I suppose the other thing would be compliance, I suppose, isn't it? Because you've got to keep compliant, with all these regulatory regimes, you could say, and especially if you're operating across multiple geographies, like I know where you've been working before, and like my examples a bit earlier, there's a huge, I won't say overhead, there's a huge mandatory element to that. If you're working in a bank, it's the same kind of thing. You remember being in RBS, a few years ago, and 90% of the change plan was all regulatory compliance stuff, and then we had like 10%. New stuff, new product introduction or whatever. And I remember some of the board meetings when I was at Tesco Bank, and the Tesco directors go, "What? This is like, it's like we want it the other way around. We want 90% new stuff and 10% regulatory stuff." And the LBS goes, "No, that's not going to happen. Not in our lifetime." So that was quite an interesting change process.
And it's changing so fast, and you have, as a result of that, you're not only having to really keep up with the latest regulations, but try and anticipate what the different regulatory bodies will go. And you have especially in the area of use of AI, there isn't even a framework that is broadly aligned. So you've got the EU AI Act, which is there, and now you can read it, understand it, and try and comply with it. UK, although is broadly aligned, but it's taking a different approach. In the US, you have state level regulations, and some of them are agreed, some of them are being drafted, some are nowhere to be seen, but at some point it's coming. So try and do the right thing while you have the right people, the right infrastructure, and the automation in place to be as compliant as possible with all of the above. Is a major challenge.
And what I mean, just a question. I mean, obviously, so you're in these organizations, and you've been in these organizations, and you look at it through you should have a change transformational agenda, a transformation purpose and mission. Do is the leadership of these organizations, are they of these new technologies? Are you having to spend a lot of time educating them on the opportunity, but also the risk you need to manage? Is it like an exec level, or are you finding that those people are taking personal ownership for upskilling themselves on that kind of area, so that they can be more confident, they can understand that stuff? Because I appreciate their industry knowledge is probably second to none, but then you got, to my mind, I think in industry these days, you can't just like shut yourself away from this whole tsunami that's flying around the world. You've got to have some kind of level of technology awareness. So any thoughts on that? Is that improving? Is it getting worse? Are you seeing receptiveness to it?
This is a bit anecdotal, so this is speaking from my experience. Every board or exco and board that I have worked with over the last certainly 5 years have clearly reached the conclusion that they're really not doing enough with their data, and they're not probably as fast as they want to be on AI. And that's a good thing, because if you don't have that level of realization and urgency, then you won't be progressing as fast as you can. But naturally, and I think one of the points you made is I think it's very true. You have brilliant leaders in those boards who are very, very capable when it comes to the business aspects, but you don't have sufficient representation that with people who really understand what these technologies mean and how to make the most of them. So an ongoing process has been, and I think all the boards are now very open to it, in my experience, of really having the right people go in and do a bit of an educational session, but not too much of it. Absolutely explain the principles, the differences, and the finer points. But the fact that when you see something in the news about AI passing a test, a geography test or biology test, that doesn't mean the next day you can just turn it on and it will solve your business problems. So boards are very open to that. But what you've got to really do to get the most out of those board conversations and create the right momentum behind the next steps is quickly relate that to what that means to the business and where it can be applied and where it's too early to apply. One good example of a conversation I've had a number of times with different organizations, and almost with the same conclusion. There was a flurry of let's put a chatbot in place, let's put it in customer-facing interactions, and it will make it quicker, it will make it cheaper, and to a certain degree, that's all correct.
Your NPS score will go like that. Yeah.
But that's the riskiest thing, because that is your touch point with your customers. You really want to be in control of that. You really want that to be the best possible experience that your customer has.
But Ako, you see, when you're on the IVR and you like being on it for 37 minutes, a bot sounds pretty attractive. Do you know what I mean? I'm not saying that every organization has got 37-minute IVRs, but some of them have.
But there are some really good examples of where that has backfired significantly. There are many examples these days, but I think one of the ones that I still remember and it's stuck in my mind is Air Canada. I think it was last year, where somebody was in a distress situation. He was trying to book a ticket to go and to his grandmother's funeral or something like that. So he inquired about whether they have a discount fee for bereavement flights. And the bot said, yeah, absolutely, you can go ahead, book your flight, and then you can ask for the refund. And he did. Then Air Canada's response was, well, no, you have to apply for the discount in advance. So the guy took them to court and he won the case. You don't want that to be the headline news because you automated your customer services. So I think
that's a bit like that thing the bot did it.
I think actually, if I remember correctly, I think at some point Air Canada's legal defense was the chatbot is its own legal entity, so it should be accountable for its decision. Hang on, that's not how it really works.
What what do they call it? They what do you when you move employees from one entity to another? You know, if you kind of move all the bots out of you, it's this new separate subsidiary.
No, I think going back to the board conversation, so it's painting those pictures and then really start helping the board see where you can start in a safe way, in a process where you have a lot of human involvement to start with and have that human oversight. And if it fails, it's safe because it's not real time. You have time to recover from it, and it gives you the learning opportunity. And I think creating the boards that I have worked with, they all seem to be keen on balancing two things. And of course, you have to help them to arrive at that point. One is how do you let a large number of people experiment with these new technologies? Because that's very valuable. That creates the organizational learning, it educates people, you discover the real use cases and so on.
It like unleashes the creativity and knowledge of people as well. So
it creates a bit of a buzz, but that actually never going to give you something that is scalable. So how do you balance that will really move that's not an easy balancing act. The other thing that you've got to really very very carefully but very deliberately raise at the board level is that there is a fundamental structural imbalance when it comes to really making the most of AI, which is almost no organization has got the foundational capabilities in place. So you don't have your data in the right quality, you don't have them in the right place, you don't have the right ownership, all that lovely stuff that we all know about. But equally, so that means basically most organizations, your data is not ready for AI. But equally, no organization really can afford to invest 3 years and multiple millions of pounds, dollars, whatever is your favorite currency, to build that foundation and then do AI. So striking that balance, and that has to be something with visibility, not in the nitty-gritty, but at a strategic level that has to be visible at board level so the decisions are seen in the right light, and then you have the right prioritization for what you want to drive through.
Is that a classic? So is that that triggered in my head the kind of classic eat the elephant? How do you eat the AI elephant, or how do you eat the AI or the data elephant? There's two elephants in the room, isn't there? So yeah, what you're saying is from a change point of view, you can't like kind of switch off the business and then just go into this kind of bubble for a few years to do all this big thing and then switch on this new operating model with all this sexy AI stuff and everything's pristine. You kind of like got I suppose it's back to the racing analogy, isn't it? It's like changing the wheels on the car as you're driving.
Absolutely.
And so how have you cracked that in place you've done before? What are the options you've got around approaching that? Because that's quite tough.
I'll share with you what I have done in multiple places and how it works, but I can promise you the first part of that does not make you popular. So I think that
you mean you're not getting many birthday cards anymore? Christmas cards?
Not for a while, and then you start getting them. I think you've got, at the beginning, you've got to be brutally honest in really painting the picture of where the gap is and how big is the gap to do what you need to do at scale. So because if you don't do that, then you will always be chasing your expectation management, and it's just not going to help you in the long run. But then on the other side of that, you've got to focus even more on where the opportunities are. So I think some of my unwritten rules are read, don't run. proof of concepts unless you really, really need to proof a concept.
I remember this actually from a while ago. I love that actually, because you're one of the rare people that actually said that.
And that comes from.
Can you explain that a little bit about that? Because that's quite a big one, I think.
Yeah, so I think, and that really comes from personal learning and personal experience. So when I first started looking at AI, or more specifically machine learning, in a serious way and incorporating them into business strategies, into technology strategies, and really them as part of the product and creating new products and so on, was roughly about 9 or 10 years ago. The technology was very, very, very different. So a large part of what we were doing was actually a proof of concept. So which machine learning model would you apply for which of those use cases? Then in some cases, having 2 or 3 of them going in parallel to choose the right one. And so there was a considerable R&D element to what we were doing. One good example I still remember, I was working for a media organization, and one of the large use cases of huge potential, if we managed to crack it, was summarizing articles, summarizing written text, but not just in a simplistic way, summarizing it and then understanding who are the people who are quoted, attributing the right quotes to the right people, and then relating them to each other and understanding with the specific language announces is whether what they said is neutral, positive, negative, and then having a bit more.
Oh, like a summary of sentiment kind of thing.
Yeah. That we had to engage with a number of startups that were created by very, very clever people coming out of university with PhDs in NLP, and even that was very, very slow progress and very painful. Now, not all of it, but quite a lot of that you can just get practically for free from the LLMs. Now, of course, not perfect, but if you compare it to how the situation was in 2015, 16, 17, it's very different.
It's a bit like then you were like handcrafting it out of like wood or stone, basically, and now you just press a button.
Another example was we needed to look at vast amount of information and pick out the pictures and videos and then determine which of those were adverts, which of them were related to the content. And depending on that, they would follow different tracks and then understand the content. A lot of that is just there for you now. Unless you genuinely really need to prove that the technology really works, don't do proof of concept. Instead, do invest some of that, a small proportion of that time and energy into really understanding the use cases, and even more importantly, on top of the feasibility of those use cases, how mature the technology is to really implement it, how commercially viable, all of those things, is start from day one by thinking about 2 things. One, assume you have it, how are you going to operationalize it? Because the world is full of brilliant looking, fantastic looking proof of concepts, where even pilot projects with very, very promising outcome, but actually they just stay at that stage and they never operationalize, because taking the output of a model and putting it into your operational processes with all the messiness that you have in your operational processes is a very different game. And then the second part is how, especially with Gen.AI, if you are in a regulated environment, insurance, good example, financial services, but lots of others, healthcare, law, and so on, what's your governance? How are you going to govern this? So one of the things in the last set of projects I was involved with, from the very early on, we put in place the governance framework. And by design, it was very high level, it was principle based, but it very, very clearly said, here are the principles that we're going to follow. These are the regulations that we're going to have to comply with. These are the emerging regulations that we need to keep an eye on. And then in a complex organization, what you cannot really do is do all that work and then at the last minute, take it to a governance committee, and guess what? They will tell you no. So you've got to work with a lot of people and have a lot of people engaged. One of the good things that worked, I think, was make sure your governance is multi-tiered not from just a bureaucracy level, but make sure that you have the right accountability. So very early on, make sure that people who are at initiation, ideation phase, deep down in a business unit or part of a business unit, they know what it takes to take this into production and what are the governance processes and what is the governance policy. So they take ownership. Once they tell you they're happy and they meet their obligations, then what's the next level up? Usually in a complex environment, that will be your business unit level. And you don't want that to be at project management level. You want the project managers, absolutely driving it, but you want the execs for that business.
You want the line management, the operational line management to be very engaged, right?
In regulated industries, we've actually made the risk committee for that business unit to have visibility and then oversight and approve it. Then ultimately you want to bring it into a group level if you have it. So those are some of the steps that will really help you go from a lot of excitement, a lot of potential, a lot of activity, and then avoid the major disappointment that follows, and then actually being able to scale it and to operationalize it. I think that's why I say don't do proof of concept, go after the use cases, have a very clear structure, and be able to adapt, because you're going to have to pivot. You will have to pivot. And back to the earlier point, you will never have all the data that you need. So as part of prioritizing your use cases, some of the typical things that work for me very well, where do we actually have the data for this? Can we trust that data? In most cases, the answer is no, but in some areas, it's a lot easier to get the data into a state that you can actually work with. Not perfect, but you can work with. Do you have a real business owner in place who, and this is where a lot of AI initiatives fall, because you do all your great work, you calculate what the benefit is, either in new revenue, savings, whatever it might be, risk mitigation. But then ultimately, you as the data, AI, technology, wherever you are, guy who actually implements it, you're not on point to deliver that. So you're going to have to...
It's a bit like, what's the P&L commercial impact? And so you've got to embed that.
Somebody will have to put their hands up and say, look, I am responsible for this benefit and I will deliver it, assuming the solution works within the agreed parameters. I spent a lot of my time actually putting that in place at the exco level down. So once then you had a small solution, then you could immediately see the benefit from it. And that creates the buzz and momentum and the continuity.
Yeah, because you could extrapolate once you've proved it, you could extrapolate the benefit and realization. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and that helps you with building out the infrastructure that you don't have, one slice at a time. But then that's a different question, because you need to have the right people who are involved in this that can think that far ahead and strategically, but they're not perfectionists. They're very happy to take a reasonably messy and convoluted route to get there, as long as they know eventually where they want to end up, and then be able to make the trade-offs on the way to get there.
That's good. That's great. No, thanks for sharing that. I mean, I think one of the things I was just thinking about was how do you slice it? You know, if you think about an oil as a bread, a loaf of bread, right? So do you slice it this way, or you slice it this way, or you slice it, you know, how do you do it? Or do you slice it both ways? Or do you actually take a little, you know, element of the whole loaf out?
Like those little samples you take out of a cheese.
The cheese, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I think that there is a fundamentally kind of minimum level of foundational capability that you're going to have. So, but you have to really distill that down to the bare minimum, because otherwise the cost and the timeline will be not.
Well, that's the thing I was thinking, because you can sometimes I won't say over egg it. You know, I don't understand that phrase, but you can over commit. You build this, you know, Battlestar Galactica foundation on the assumption that the whole, you know, the use case is going to work, and then the whole scale up is going to work. But sometimes you can play that. You've got to be very careful about how you design that, what's required to get that use case flying or delivered and embedded, which I think is the, you know, I was just thinking I was thinking about actually calling it the RBF, the Reality Bites framework. You know, 'cause you were talking about, you know, like that embed that. And I agree with completely with the stuff I've doing in change as well. Actually, the thing about the frontline people, what is their day going to be different, and how is their jobs to be done? You know, the Clayton Christensen stuff. You know, how is
Yeah,
their day going to be different, day in the life, week in the life, month in the life, with and without this new capability that you're delivering in? How does it map to the P&L? How does it map to the accountability, the racing model? Yeah, it's all that stuff that's that melting pot of piece you need to work through.
yeah.
And get that. But once you've got that level of confidence and that foundation, you can actually then build it out.
That level of engagement beyond the foundation, that level of engagement with in the process of creating that business case and having that accountability, I have used that as a direct influencing factor in prioritizing which use case, because you might have a very, very, very promising use case, but if actually no one is owning it, don't touch it. Do not touch it. Use case that really sounds boring, and then you're automating what 5 people are doing on spreadsheets. But actually, by doing that, you generate a tiny amount of benefit, direct benefit, 100, 200K a year, but then you're freeing up those 5 people to go and do more complex tasks. Then go after that, because within 3, 4, 5 months, whatever the time frame might be, but reasonably short amount of time, you actually have something tangible that not you, but the person who's getting that benefit can stand in front of everyone and advocate for the approach. That then generally what the magic point in all of these things when you're trying to drive change and transformation, whether that's an AI data related or technology or anything else or organization, the magic point is where it changes from you trying to push it to a pull when people come and ask you to do it with their organization, with their teams, with they come with problems, say, I would like to be the next.
So that's a nice experience to have, though, isn't it? That'll be the way it switches. So you become like the doctor, then you become like the doctor's surgery, where they're all queuing up outside to me.
Yeah, and actually, what you have to do, I think, you've got to challenge yourself as well, and sometimes maybe go and give yourself a big scary target in a way, not in terms of the doability of the use cases, but the level of the sponsorship, because that creates a different kind of buzz and drive. And when you deliver, it just amplifies. So if you can, in a complex corporate environment, if you have a powerful exco member on board and they see the benefit you delivered to their organization and they go and become an advocate, that's a lot more powerful, because they are in every board meeting. You are not in every board meeting. That's a far more effective, and that's a much better way of laying the foundation for then doing more of it.
Yeah, the classic torchbearer role, I suppose, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so I mean, it's interesting just talking about that scenario. Kind of, you know, takes me back to a lot of the change stuff I've done. It's the you know, in the conversation we've had, the process and the people stuff is the hard stuff, and
Absolutely.
and the tech stuff. I think the tech stuff has got, I don't know, is it easier? I don't know, kind of, but not. But you know, it's in the paradigm of change. I remember doing it as part of my MBA thesis, actually, winning the hearts and minds. So winning the hearts and minds, and I actually bought some squeezy brains and some squeezy hearts, and I put them on all the desks of the whole bank. We did it in all the stores in Tesco, and to get Tesco Personal Finance at the time, Tesco Bank, on the radar. Doing things like that was the thing about getting the fire behind people to get them to change, or to think about it differently, especially the stores, because they had no idea about anything really to do. They just was putting leaflets out and just, yeah. But they think about, you know, pounds, shillings, and pence in the till. You know, trying to explain the MPV of a pet insurance policy to a store manager in Manchester was quite entertaining at the best of times. So, you know, I mean, that's interesting, because I think what you're saying is that your recent experience even with this kind of AI and data stuff is you're talking about, so you've got to take the leadership, you've got to grab the nettle, and you've got to actually structure it in a way where you put a disciplined process around it. Otherwise, it's going to, you know, you're going to get another, you know, you're going to get the risk of it failing. and it not being embraced and it not being embedded in the operation.
You can't, this is a classic one, and AI is the same as many other waves of, in this respect, many other waves of technology. Now, of course, it's very different in many other ways, but when it comes to the embedding it in an organization and getting it to deliver real outcomes, you can't treat it just as a technology or a data project transformation or any of those things. It is fundamentally a business transformation. It is fundamentally a change process that you need people to believe in it, to drive it, to be part of it. And of course, there's a lot more to it than that. But I think at the fundamental level, if you don't treat it as a transformation and a people-led change, it's not going to work, especially with AI. It's very emotive and it's everywhere. And for good reasons, everyone has different measures of excitement and skepticism or even anxiety when it comes to it. So you've got to work through those.
I mean, one of the things that we find in insurance is that obviously you've got to be very precise as well. So you mentioned obviously that, the data is going to be in a great state. It's going to be in a continually, you're looking at the quality of that and the health of it and the freshness of it. One of the things we ran I don't know if you saw it yet, but I'll send you the link afterwards. But we ran a insurance data roast event back in, a bit like a comedy roast on insurance data back in March with some of our advisory board members and our CEO Andrew. And it was one of the things we were talking about was about data science and actuaries and underwriters, that kind of dynamic about, you've got the new data science people joining organizations and being the stats guys, and then obviously trying to bring in new ways of the models and everything like that. And, is it a battle or is it a kind of like a bro hangout? They all kind of like get it, and they all kind of like go to the pub together in Leadenhall Street or whatever. They all kind of like, they're all very pally, or they're kind of still not really kind of integrated. Any thoughts on that?
I think the issues come is where you have people either speaking completely different language, so they have completely different terminologies, KPIs, and definitions for essentially the same concept, or usually they go together. They use the same terminology, the same KPI, the same definition, or broadly the same, to mean totally different things. And then that's where you end up with the battles of, well, my version is better than yours, or your conversion rate is not my conversion rate, your churn rate is not my churn rate. These are not easy things to fix. I mean, we can all laugh about them, but they are the result of these definitions, these data models, or the back of them having evolved and integrated into business processes in various parts of the organization in complete silos and without any coordination. So chances are, if you have those three, you have your data scientists, you have your actuarials, you have your finance people all using the same, and underwriting all using the same language and the same terminology just by chance. It's impossible.
Is that so? The companies that have actually cracked this, have they created like their own lexicon? Have they kind of created a new lexicon? Because there's definitely new ways of doing things. There's new phrases and there's new language elements that people like the technology sort of people from a data science background can add to the party. But obviously they've got to be respectful of that kind of the history and the decades of decades of knowledge, the tacit knowledge, but also the written down knowledge of those individuals as well. It's an interesting balance, isn't it?
It depends on your starting point. If you are one of the new insurance companies and you're starting fresh and you are a lot more, so of course, if you have the foresight to do it in a standardized way, it's the easiest way. By the way, even in those organizations, that doesn't happen like that because there is a set of different drivers and urgency. But I think it's really realizing and knowing that you're not going to be able to solve all those issues. You cannot do in any substantial organization, whether that's insurance or not. You're not going to be able to say, now I'm going to give you a new data model and you're going to use that from tomorrow. And by the way, that needs to flow through all the operational systems.
That's the gospel.
It's not going to happen, right? And this is, and I can say that with a degree of kind of not feeling too bad about it, because a lot of my background is in architecture. This is where still a lot of very, very clever and very well-intentioned architects, CTOs, and even CIOs really fall foul, is they know today's world doesn't work, that today's models don't work. They know more standardization is required, but they try and standardize too much too soon. Instead, as part of the same kind of approach that we were talking about, they take one set of use cases at a time, prioritize, use a lot of different factors, practical, pragmatic factors in that prioritization. This could be one of them. One example, recent example that I was involved in and I drove, and it led to a very good outcome, was there is always a lot you can do, but we focused, narrowed it down in one part of the business, in underwriting specifically, that really was critical. You needed to standardize more and more on the terminology, so you could actually, when you took a step back and looked at underwriting performance across a diverse group, you had some meaningful data. You didn't need to interpret.
Yeah, interpolate it.
So then, and you can't do that as the CDO, as the whatever your role is, if you are not in the underwriting, and you cannot say this is the standard you use it. What you can do is convince everyone that you're not going to get the benefit from this unless we will talk the same language, and be human about that. Don't just throw the textbooks at people. Then get a very strong sponsorship from in this case was the underwriting leadership, and have the best expert in that area actually working with the teams to come up with, here's the minimum model that we need going forward. And in that instance, what we did, we started really, really small, a handful of KPIs, and then give the business units the freedom to then, as long as they commit to giving you what that minimum set is with the required level of quality, and they take ownership of it. You can't demand that they update all their processes to use the same. As long as they can actually translate to and from in a meaningful way, then that's an easier start. Now, gradually you can push that down further and further, and when you're doing new things, you can start it from stand. So those are the logically easy but really hard to actually get it done principle. But as soon as the first steps were agreed, we had a whole portfolio of initiatives and use cases that incrementally then either expanded that set of common definition or expanded the usage of them so they become more ingrained. And I think that way, it's not a quick fix. You can't really fix these things in a short amount of time, but you've got to pick your battles.
No, it's cool. Enough. I mean, you confirm what I thought as well and what I've experienced myself. It's just, I think there's a little nuance where sometimes some people are, because if they're, I'm going to go at technical people, but sometimes people who've gone from a very technical background are too insensitive to the human dimension of why would you not, it's like logically in their brain, why would you not adopt this tomorrow? And will you not switch it on tomorrow? It's not quite as easy as that. So it's like tempering that kind of a change acceleration with reality, I suppose. So given what you've done over the last period of time, what's the future hold? What does the rest of 2025 and the rest of 2030 look like? What's going to float your boat in the future, so to speak?
Yeah, no, good question. I think one of the things I enjoy, in fact, two things I really enjoy doing, is working with various businesses, the leadership teams. Because I'm a problem solver at heart, so I love dealing with ambiguity and solving business problems. Nothing gets me more motivated than working with the business leaders and technology leaders to do two things. They are distinct, but they are highly related. So one is crafting meaningful, pragmatic, deliverable data and technology strategies. So that is going to really enable and accelerate the business plans and business strategy and so on. And when I say data and technology strategy, hopefully from the conversation that we've had, I definitely don't mean a PowerPoint document. It's actually a model that you can apply and you can then grow with it. So that's the first thing. The second one is turning data and technology to a tool that opens up new business opportunities. What I mean is using what data and AI and more broadly technology can do today and what is on the horizon in the medium and long term to reimagine a company's business model, either in parts or as a whole. And I think this is critical. I think that the debate of whether AI is, for example, relevant to your industry, to your company, that's over. It's here, it's real, it's having an impact. That impact is only going to accelerate. But how do you really turn that into an advantage? Because that presents a huge opportunity, but also it could be a major risk and major threat as well. And then for me, the real fun really begins when I start working with the various business, data, technology teams to get into the real nitty-gritty aspects of the plan and solution and making it all happen. So I've done that multiple times in my career, and that's what broadly speaking, that's what I intend to do more and more of. For when it comes up, we talk quite naturally, we talked a lot about data and AI. So for me, if you are doing any of those things in 2025, is hopefully the data foundation along the lines that we talked about. That's a must-have, but you have to do it properly. You have to do it in a targeted way that we talked about. Absolutely spend time on AI and Gen.AI, but it needs to deliver tangible results. And then responsible and ethical use of AI is going to be a key theme in everything I'm sure that I will be doing this year and beyond. And the focus on creating the people capability to really drive all that transformation, all that adoption, and do it in the right way. There are some things that are nice to have, some things that are probably should have, and I think it depends on the context of the specific organization. But using modern data products, there you go, there's another buzzword, but really in a way that goes hand in hand with real ownership. And as we were discussing, start it small, do it pragmatic, but have a way of and a good plan of how you incrementally scale that. Use AI to augment decisions and to help people to use it effectively as a people multiplier, because I think that's what many organizations need in insurance, in financial services, everywhere else, and so on. I think, and one personal pledge is encourage everyone around me, everyone I can work with and influence, is don't chase the trends for the sake of them. There's plenty out there. Every day there is a new trend. Every day there is a new scare story. Every day there is a new big promise. There is a signal in that noise, but you can't just chase the latest fad. And I think that's something I intend to help as many people to do as I can.
Interesting. Yeah, no, thanks for sharing that. It's I think I don't think it's going away. I think it's not to say that we need to talk about it. I'm not saying we have to talk about it in any detail, but 2025 is supposed to be the year of the agents, isn't it? Like last year was the year of the models, I think. And then when I was in Copenhagen back in 2023, I did a presentation, which is on YouTube actually, called from the Go-To conference, talking about beyond Gen.AI. Obviously, I didn't predict any agents, but obviously now apparently they're everywhere. I saw one yesterday. There's a new company, what it's called, Flow AI, and it's got an agent Neo, so it's back to the like to Keanu Reeves in the Matrix, which apparently does all your tasks and while you're sleeping, while you're not sleeping, etc., etc. Yeah, I don't know if you've seen any good things in the agents area yet, or it's all hyperbole yet, or it's all marketing, but it looks like it's coming down the chute.
I think definitely it's a very interesting concept, and I think they show early promises, but to be honest, I think also what you said there is a lot of that still is in the labs for most. If you're looking at it from a large scale enterprise adoption, that doesn't mean they're not going to get there soon. So I think agentic AI or AI agents and whatever the difference between them is. Let's not go into that. I think it's an area worth experimenting with, and it's worth trying to assess where they can be meaningfully applied. So definitely an area of interest. So, and something I'm sure I'll be doing more with. It's a great idea. So where you have systems that can autonomously work together towards a goal, in theory, brilliant. In practice, I think most people are still trying to figure it out. And as always, doing a agent or a set of agents to do a number of tasks is not easy. It's when you release it. It's not hard. It's not the hardest part. But when you release it out into the wild and then you come across the complexities of different data standardization or the lack of it, interfaces going down all the time, regulation, and then the transparency.
It's also how you validate it as well. And it's like, what's the happy path, the unhappy path? It's like all those kind of things. It's just like,
yeah. If you have who's accountable, going back maybe to that now old example of Air Canada, who's accountable when you have their agents, the customer's agents, a supplier's agent, all working together and getting to a certain outcome? One is, do you know how that outcome was arrived?
Well, just wait, you see, Ako. You see, you'll be booking you'll have your own digital twin agent. Yeah, your Ako agent booking your Air Canada flight with another agent.
So when something goes wrong, whose agent is liable?
And then the agents are going like this. It was him. It was her.
How do you know why they arrived at that certain decision? These things, when in isolation, in a limited consumer application, they're all very impressive and they are helpful, and I'm sure a lot then at a personal level will be very useful. But when you scale it to enterprise, there are layers and layers of complexity that you need to take into account. And I think it will mature like anything else. Maybe in 12 months' time, if you and I are having this conversation again, I think there will be some really good examples of where agentic systems have delivered value, and there might be some very well publicized horror stories as well. So I think keep an eye on it, experiment with it, but don't commit to it too early.
Yeah, you just reminded me. You know what? Next episode will come. You come on. We'll both have the kind of the Men in Black. The black glasses on. Like we're
reminding us of every word that we said in the past that didn't come true.
With the sharp suits on, exactly. Yeah, exactly. That's fantastic. No, thank you very much for coming on the show today. It's been a great conversation, and I think there's a lot of truth you've talked about, and there's a lot of really good, interesting stories and techniques, I suppose, about how people should navigate this stuff, because it's just constant. It's something that's getting, this technology stuff. I mean, I still find it incredible that, when you think about the last 10 years ago, 20 years ago, et cetera, how it's now actually such a central part of everybody's lives. It's just incredible. I mean, it blows your mind really about what people can do, and everything. Every week seems to be something happening. Much gratitude for coming on the show today. That was Ako Sabir. I can't list all the different companies he's worked for and all different industries he's worked for, but we'll put that on the information when we share it across social media in the next few days. So thanks for coming on the show, Ako. Absolute pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you, Andrew. It was a pleasure speaking.
And that was Andrew Turner, a host of the Praxi Pod. Catch us next time on the next episode. Ciao, ciao.
Thank you, Andrew.